It's the Republicans and the Democrats. In 1999, there was a thing passed called the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, which repealed kind of long-standing Depression-era rules that separated insurance from brokerage firms, from banking firms. And these were protections that in effect said we can't trust these guys. If we let them do all the wild financial trading and the creation of these financial instruments, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And what did they do? They took mortgages, repackaged them as securities that could be traded like stocks, and ultimately they created a lot of wealth based on borrowed money, and they want us to bail them out. The history of the last 100 years of American politics is filled with presidents being elected without 50% of the vote. That is all we would need to make it impossible to spoil a contest. And if losing the presidency doesn't inspire these political parties to get motivated, I would have to say to you that, and it's a sad conclusion to reach, but they don't want to fix it, because right now, even if they lose the contest arbitrarily from time to time, they're in office at least half the time. And if they change how they do things and require a majority, then things would change. Now, there's a movement, I'm sure many of you heard about the National Popular Vote effort. It's a good movement, but let me tell you the problem with it. It fixes one of the problems that happened in 2000, which is the candidate with the most votes didn't get elected president. That's a big problem. But it didn't address the second problem, which is we elect presidents that don't have over a majority of the vote. And that's what we have to get. So you can decide that there isn't a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, and you're probably right. One party's 100% bad, the other one's 85% bad. I know I'm being generous. But at some point you have to say, is that worth walking into the voting booth and cynically voting for something you don't really want? And why reward them for not fixing a problem they're very good complaining about? And why allow candidates that are trying to make this a stronger and better democracy to be attacked and ridiculed and told, well, you're irrelevant, when we're not even allowed into debates? And how do we allow private corporations that decide who gets to debate to do this to us in our democracy? I mean, it's really quite insulting, and it's so insulting that the only way to change it is by communicating to them that it's got to be different. Peter Camejo died recently, and I'm sure many people here knew him. He was a good friend of mine, and a really beautiful man and very, very talented guy. I always enjoyed how he looked at things. And he shared with me, the story of the abolitionists of the 1840s. And I heard him say that, James Birney ran for office as an abolitionist with the Liberty Party, and I guess he was, some would say, an irrelevant candidate, that you would have been throwing your vote away if you had voted for him, because he only got 1% in the polls when he ran. And yet, 20 years later, this country was in a civil war, and I don't think any of us would look back at that time and sanction the wildly absurd arguments that were made to justify slavery. And yet, at the time, Bernie was looked down upon. And if you think of the early 20th century, the battles for women's suffrage and Eugene Debs fighting, arguing that women should be allowed to vote. And the prevailing argument at the time, this was a candidate that only got 5 or 6% of the vote. You would have been throwing your vote away had you voted for him if you listened to the people that are trying to scare you from voting for what you really want. I want to read you a couple of the things that were being said in Debs' time to really convey to you how truly absurd it was. There was a fellow, Elihu Root, who was a Secretary of War to President McKinley. He was Secretary of State to Roosevelt, and he won the 1912 Nobel Peace Prize. He wrote, if women become involved in politics, they will stop marrying, having children, and the human race will die out. Women are emotional creatures incapable of making sound political decisions. President Roosevelt said in 1908, "Personally, I believe in women's suffrage, but I am not an enthusiastic advocate of it because I do not regard it as a very important matter." And Grover Cleveland said, "Sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. The relative positions to be assumed by men and women in the working out of our civilization were assigned long ago by a higher intelligence than ours." So, how do you feel when you've got major parties and candidates saying to you, "You can't have health care. We can't give you better wages. You can't have peace. We've got to fight the terrorists. We've got to invade countries. Now the debate is whether or not we take their natural resources to pay for our invasions. Oh, this invasion's unpopular? Well, we're going to move brigades into this other country. Oh, military spending, which has gone from $300 billion in 2001 to $500 billion in 2008, not including the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, that's about at $190 billion. So it's gone from 3 in 2001 to 7 in 2008, and both major party candidates are telling you we need more military spending. I'm going to increase military spending. It's really insulting and disgusting that this is